Welcome to another edition of Strange New Pod. I'm your Fleet Admiral and host, Julian Brown, alongside the best bridge crew this side of a good cigar mariachi band. Don't think too hard on that, Jean-Luc. Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. Captain Hawk is here, and he is not a merry man. No. And Captain MC is here, wondering if one of those supernovas in the Delta Quadrant caused by the Continuum maybe leads to the Q Continuum in the Kelvinverse. You never know.
Ooh.
And if you didn't think about that, you're thinking about that now.
I'm always thinking about that.
I kind of figured. Already getting compliments on the jacket. We'll talk about that more in a few minutes. It is a pretty cool jacket. This week. Oh, actually, before that, how we doing, guys? How goes it? How's the world? How's life?
It's snowing here, and that's upsetting.
It's not snowing here, but actually the sounds of it I'm hearing outside, it probably is going to start very soon.
Well, I would trade your snow for the rain that we keep getting and just like the miserable. Actually, it's been pretty nice here. I can't complain too much, but I'm tired of the rain. I just need I need PA. We're going through like second winter or first spring. We have like 10 seasons in Philadelphia, so
It feels like the same here in that we had an absolutely balmy day yesterday. It was awesome.
I was in a tank top, and that's why I'm mad that it's snowing now.
Yeah, I wore shorts yesterday. So at least we're all getting some good weather. That's good. That's good. This week, a very happy birthday to the one, the only, the legendary John Lancie. You guys know him as Q. You might know him as John. I have a friend who actually works with John Lancie in Philadelphia at the Curtis Institute. So I'll just do that real quick. I should have asked him to get him on the show. He's talked about doing that. So maybe a missed opportunity, but I think it's weird. We would just be talking about him the whole night, and people don't like that. So we're going to celebrate him tonight instead of talking to him. We've busted out the band. We've hid Ben Sisko from the festivities, and we've gotten that bubble bath ready for Kathy. It is our best of Q episode. But before we get into all of that, MC, can you thank our amazing patrons at the Ready Room level and above, please?
Sure. Thanks to Simon Stager, Jeff Reeve, Mariah Gossett, Tallulah, Jen Stein, Tina Alexander, Joe Saporito, Noe Santos, Keng Hui, Tatako Nagumo, Fernanda Nogales, SMK, Colin Davidson, Chatterhand 2049, Jesco, Michael Graham, Emily and Travis, Maggie Light, Wayne Ritz, Scone of Arc, Sean, Jay Howard, Mehalani Uchiyama, Matt Harker, Joshua Lewis, Tara Poland, Slope 74, Rude Parakeet, Aaron W., Carl Angoli, Michael Kwan, Caitlin, Elizabeth Dean, Jim McMahon, Sedano 317, Puka Hair, 3 Fries Short, Kate Tip, Chirping the Reed Alert over a Pineapple, Sean Manning, Asher at the Bat, Chris Waterman, RHCB, Martin Simpson, Norman Buckwald, David Prime Hildebrand, Taryn J. Robinson, Rob Grinner, Eric the Red, Trouble, Jamie Roberts, Honeyberry, Paul Taylor Pitt, Brett Jones, Michael P., Margin Walker 82, Melissa Bartell, Jesse Robbins, Kim and Chris
Finoglio.
I have not pronounced that yet, so
That's okay. You did good. You did well. Good job. Well done. Also a very big thank you, as always, to our Badmirals, our EPs, Simon Stager, Chris Waterman, Tara Poland, Brett Jones, Dana, Matt Harker, and Jim McMahon. Thank you for keeping the Q Continuum at bay, not letting them get into any more civil wars, because, as you know, those cause, big explosions in space. So none of those, please.
Irreparable damage.
Irreparable damage. Yes, Dana, MC's cat is giving Picard level sass tonight. Yeah, is that Gandalf behind you?
that is Gandalf.
Oh,
yes.
Gandalf.
Hey, Gandalf.
So reliable. We love Gandalf. Listen, we plug our patrons at the top of the show. We usually try not too hard to give you the spiel, join our patron, give us your money, because most of you just kind of find it on your own, and that's awesome. But I am going to plug the patron today because the collective is getting some really cool stuff since we started the year. We revamped our patron stuff at the beginning of the month. We've had a ton of bonus pods. We just sent our first quarterly stuff designed by MC, which was awesome. Yesterday's Enterprise sticker and that amazing postcard of Voyager returning home. It's just really cool what we have going on. We also have the brand new Strange New Adventures bonus pods happening, where I'm GMing a crew of 6 of our patrons through the Star Trek Adventures starter set campaign, and we've been having a blast. The first episode, we did a session 0 where you can kind of get to know the characters. That's been out for a while now, and just this week we released the first 2 scenes of Act 1, and we had a really good time doing that. I already have scene 3 recorded, and we are recording Act 2 this Sunday. So not only do our patron collective get to participate on that, but people get to listen to that. Our other patrons get to listen to that after they get access to those episodes a full month early. So a lot of really cool stuff. I will also say, if people are wondering where your yearly pin is, well, good reason why that's been delayed. Eric worked extra hard on that. We're getting that sourced right now, but the design for it is absolutely incredible, and that is coming. So you also have that to look forward to. So if you were going to join our patron and you haven't yet, and you've been like, oh, maybe I will, maybe I won't, now might be the time. Just saying. Yes, that is true. And an interview with Nana Visitor coming soon for patrons as well. So,
Ooh.
yeah, lots of really cool stuff. With that being said, thank you already, like MC said, to everybody that supports us already. It means so much. You give us the ability to keep doing amazing things like this. So thank you. Let's get into some quick news. MC, since this is you're doing this as well, why don't you give us that first bit of news?
Giraffe and I are going to be on Trexpert Quiz this Saturday. We're doing Prodigy Season 2, Part 2. This has been a long time in the making. Giraffe was supposed to do this a while back, but there was some conflicts, so we're finally doing the finals on Prodigy Season 2, and that's going to be Saturday at 6.
Awesome. Nice. That'll be really fun. I think Giraffe's throwing smiley faces in there because she's like, haha, delays. Speaking of Giraffe, WonderCon is this, I think, of like a week and a half. She'll be on a panel with the one and only Nicholas Myers. Yes, you heard that right. Nicholas Meyer is in the guy who wrote The Wrath of Khan. So if you're going to be at WonderCon, please go check that out because that's going to be fucking epic. And then also, Giraffe has been literally everywhere the past month. She just did, we've been celebrating Voyager. We're going to be celebrating Voyager all year for its 30th anniversary. She just did a Voyager, the Women of Voyager Roundtable with Clone Star podcast. That is out now on YouTube as well. So, like I just said above, not to, keep beating a dead horse, but here we are. There is so much content for you to check out right now. It is like a plethora of fun and our wild shenanigans. So go check all of that out. Speaking of wild shenanigans, I'm sweating for you guys right now because I had to wear this dope ass jacket from Heroes and Villains. It is a Starfleet letter jacket. You heard that right. Not only does this thing look awesome, it is comfortable as hell. I wore this on a really cold day the other week, and I'm so happy I did. Like, this is something you'd wear like on campus at Starfleet Academy, or maybe you're off duty and you're just roaming the decks. Yeah, I graduated from Starfleet. That's this jacket. It's got the Starfleet insignia. It's got a patch there, and I am going to take this off while we do the Strange Loop, and I'll also show you the back when that's done. You can get this and other Star Trek items right now over at heroesandvillains.com. You get 20% off using our code STRANGE, and that's off your first order. So check that out. I'm sorry, Jim, that it's always sold out in your size. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's also a good thing because that means people are buying them, and that means hopefully they'll make more Star Trek stuff. I'll try and keep a lookout for you for your size if you DM it for me. Yeah. Anything else? That was a lot.
I think that's everything.
Yeah.
I tried to go as fast as the Continuum there, but I think we're good. Okay, then let's get right to it. We are going to do the Strange New Loop. And I think this is a fun question. If Q offered you the power of the Continuum like he did Riker, would you accept the offer? Why or why not?
Honestly, yeah, you gotta take it, right? I mean, I guess like Riker had his moral conundrums about it. He, saw that his friends didn't want him and that, but come on, the power of Q. You can go back to the beginning of creation. You can go fast forward to the end of time. You can create or destroy whole planets with the snap of a finger. I mean, it's just too tempting, But that's me. I'm weak.
I heard something interesting the other day, and that's that power doesn't corrupt, power reveals. So if you're a bad person, power is not going to just make you the bad person that you always were. And if you're a good person, you're still going to be a good person. So I like to think that I'm a good person, so I would hope I would be able to actually use the Q powers correctly and maybe use them to take away power from people who don't deserve them and are being awful in our world right now. So I would be a benevolent god, but
we all hope we'd be benevolent gods,
punished.
right?
I mean, when you put it that way, it does sound a lot like a super soldier serum, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It brings out the best qualities.
Well, Riker did start doing some maybe sketchy things, and it was like, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't have this power. So
yeah,
Well, Riker's a little sketchy.
hey, now don't you talk about my man like that.
those were early days
He
for Riker.
will virtually Riker maneuver you. Sorry.
He needed to grow into things a little bit more. It was very early days, yeah.
Yeah. Jim McMahon in the chat says, given what happened to Riker, I'm not sure I'd accept the power of Q. Yeah, like we just mentioned, Riker did start to kind of make some questionable decisions. Didn't he like grow Wesley into a man?
Yes.
Yeah, like that was one of the things he did. And Wesley's like, I don't want this. This is weird. And Wesley looked nothing like he looks like now.
Really weird.
Yeah.
Well, like he looked. Will Wheaton looks like Will Wheaton. Like Will Wheaton has never stopped looking like Will Wheaton. Oh man.
The guy they got looked like one of the extras from the Edo planet.
Yes, exactly.
Like
Yeah.
this bulky
The square jaw and everything.
Yeah.
Like yeah. It's almost like they gave Wesley the super soldier serum.
Yeah, I would take the power of Q. I would take it in a heartbeat. I wouldn't think about it. And I'm not gonna lie, I'd probably make some bad decisions with it too. I think I'd make some good decisions, but I think I might, like, you know, I'd probably take advantage of it in all the wrong ways. Like I'd probably snap my mom back into life, which when you're fucking with life and death, that's probably like number one no, but don't care.
I thought of that too. So.
Yeah. So yeah.
Really the only positive is that even if you did make a bunch of mistakes, you can still fix them.
Yeah.
With a snap.
That's true. That's true. It's kind of like, yeah, the question of being a god.
And you have eternity to learn.
You do. It's true.
Very true.
It's true. Draft said, I'll take the power and be terrible and gorgeous, which we all know is absolutely accurate. She also would have taken the one ring also. YOLO. Oh, that tracks, Giraffe. I love you for it, but it tracks. Good answers. Good answers. Let's talk about Q. I didn't put an order in here. We'll see how that hurts us later into the show, but we're doing pretty well so far. So I'm gonna trust you guys.
Yeah.
Q. We meet Q. Day 1 of Star Trek: The Next Generation, right? Encounter at Farpoint, the pilot. It has its moments. It's, I think, agreed upon that it's less good or less bad than good, or other way around. It's more bad than good, but it's got some good moments.
The Q parts are good.
The Q parts are good. The Groppler Zorn parts are funky. Yeah. So it's Q's first appearance, right? He immediately comes, he traps the Enterprise in almost like it's, I feel like TOS fans probably back then were thinking, oh, look, it's like a Thulian web. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He shows up on the bridge in the outfit and he puts humanity on trial. Hawk, I know that you were there from the beginning. I'm gonna kind of go to you first here. Like, what did you think when you first met Q in Encounter at Farpoint?
I mean, like, I think I was 12 when this episode came out, and I know I watched it at the beginning, and like, I found Q fascinating as a villain. I mean, I was looking at it through the 12-year-old eyes, but for me, he was fascinating in that as he starts out very like, menacing. But then there's kind of these cracks start to develop, right? You can see like that dark humor slip through in that from the onset, especially during the trial and that, freezing Tasha at one point and that, and then like, this is a court of mercy and that, and with a kiss of his lips unfreezing her. He definitely made an impression. And like, this is coming, this is just like the first episode out. I thought he was a really impressive villain and like a great choice to start a new series.
Yeah.
Going forward.
100%. What about you, MC?
Well, Encounter at Farpoint was not my first
I know.
Q episode. My first Q episode was actually Cupid.
Yeah.
Which is such a weird first one.
That is a weird first one.
My mom was a big fan of Robin Hood. So, and I didn't get into Next Generation until a bit later. But in Encounter at Farpoint, First of all, I think it's very interesting that Q is the most memorable part of that first episode, and he wasn't originally supposed to be in it. When they decided to make it the 2 hour, they realized they didn't have enough stuff for it. So they're like, oh, well, let's put in this omnipotent being, because that's what Gene Roddenberry always did in Star Trek when he couldn't think of something. It's like, let's have this weird omnipotent being that just looks like a guy. And came up with one of the most memorable villains characters in Star Trek. The whole him coming in with the judge's robes, it's such a memorable moment. And the whole trial of humanity is something that has now been going on in Star Trek for what, 40 years? I mean, I know he says the trial never ends, but it's been going on for a long time.
Yeah. It's interesting that you were talking about Q, right? And just like, you know, one, like Q being a bit of a, like Cupid being a weird episode to start on, but Q just being a bit of like of a weirdo in the first place. And Giraffe points out, honestly, Q episodes always low key creeped me out. I would agree with that. I forget the name of the episode, but it's the one where he transports them all. I think like Worf gets stabbed by like a Civil War pig at some point. It's a season 1 Q episode.
Is that Hide and Q?
It might be Hide and Q. And I remember that episode always freaked me out as a kid. I think Wesley dies in that episode too.
Wesley dies. I think Worf dies in that.
Yeah.
Episode 2.
Yeah. It's so weird. But I mean, like, I was watching these, you know, on one in syndication, and two, I think I've mentioned this on the pod like so many times, but back when I was a wee lad, I didn't know that those VHS tapes you ordered from TV or the booklets cost money, and I ordered a bunch of them. So I would just always watch like Star Trek episodes back to back, and this is one of them. And I just always found the thing in Encounter at Farpoint with Q that always stuck out to me is like when he's fucking with them on the bridge, and he's already getting like the bants that, you know, we're going to come to love for 7 seasons with Jean-Luc. You know, when he turns into like the World War III soldier, like with the drugs and stuff, that always, always like really stuck out to me in Encounter at Farpoint. I was like, okay, this is a really cool character. And when I go back and watch that episode, even though it's not great, those moments still stick out to me, which is why I think John Delancey just like immediately wowed us from the word go.
I do think that we need to watch Encounter at Farpoint and Squire of Gothos back to back, because I think it really makes clear why people decided that Trelane was a member of the Q Continuum, because I feel like mentioning some of the things that Q does in Encounter at Farpoint is very Squire of Gothos.
You know, it's interesting that you brought up Trelane, because I was thinking about that. I was watching Q in the Gray today, and we're going to talk about that episode a lot. And it's interesting that not anytime, but a lot of the time when they bring humans into the Continuum, it's like this very like civilized wear, right? It's like, you know, these like beautiful gowns and beautiful outfits like Trelane wore, right? Like, you know, it's like Civil War era stuff. And then like Trelane wasn't Civil War era outfits, but he was still very like that. You know what I'm trying to say?
I believe it was Napoleonic.
Yeah. It just was still that like very same like regal theme. Like they want to put on this sense of like pomp and power. And I've always been on board the Trelane theory as well. So
yeah. It's not just like, you know, it's not just him playing dress up in that. I mean, the whole point of Q is that he's like this awful, terrible mirror that, you know, for humanity. You know, when he looks at humanity, he doesn't see where they are in that. He sees where they were in that. You know, it's like, you know, the conquistadors and that, World War II, you know, World War III, and that he holds him. He becomes like a funhouse mirror for humanity to look at its own awfulness.
Yeah. No, 100%. Draft thinks that we're going to see Q. That's who she thinks Rhys Darby is playing in season, or I guess in season 3 or 4 of Strange New Worlds. That would be amazing.
That
by the way,
would be so cool.
That would be interesting.
We're not going to talk too much about like some of the episodes that are like it's Q, but like Q, like, you know, like Q who, but like, you know, Q, for all the bullshit that he gives the Enterprise crew throughout the years, and especially in the first season, he does evolve from this kind of like omnipotent trickster who maybe doesn't give a fuck to this like more nuanced figure that is, I think, definitely guiding the Enterprise and Jean-Luc than anyone else. You know, how do you guys feel about his evolution from like the tough love, right, that we see all the way in season, I think it's season 2, right,
Mhm.
with Q Who, which is like got people killed, to the almost like the journeyman guiding Jean-Luc in an episode, say like Tapestry, which is a beloved Q episode. His evolution to kind of becoming that character. Hawk.
I mean, we know like at some point like his focus was just on humanity in that, because as he tells Riker, there's something about humanity in that. The Q Continuum saw a lot of themselves in humanity and where they started out from, and it kind of fascinated and also scared them a little bit, that to the point where in that they actually sent Q to get involved in this, especially as they saw humanity reaching out further into the stars, and that this is why they were tested. It's like, okay, you're going out there, we need to prove to ourselves that you even have a right to be out there.
Yeah.
Because we've seen the terrible things you do, we've seen some of the great things that you're capable of doing. But they, for some reason or other, they needed to take an interest in humanity and their exploration of the stars. And Q was a representative of that.
Yeah, 100%. MC.
I'm going to disagree with what Hawk says. I
Oh,
enjoy what you said, but I don't think that's what's exactly going on. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be dipping into some other episodes that we're going to be talking
please.
about.
yeah.
In the first couple of seasons, Q is just immensely bored. And that's why he does all of this playful trickster, basically Loki stuff. And it really, I think the episode Death Wish really puts the pin in the Q is just fucking bored, because that's the episode where we see the Continuum, where you see the old versus new factions, and they're not doing anything except just reading magazines. The Continuum doesn't give a shit about anything. Q does. But we find out later on they're actually incredibly disapproving of everything that Q does, which we'll get into next. And I think that once he's kind of experienced the whole trickster thing, and also when he does the whole being human for a while, that's kind of where we start to get the flip in Q, when he starts to become more the teacher, the guide to Jean-Luc. There's certainly more of a fondness there, rather than the I'm gonna kill your crew members and then bring them back to life.
Or I'm just going to get some of your crew members killed to show you how big and bad the Borg are and have you turn back, with your tail between your legs and go home and stay out of space, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, I almost feel like I should have put Tapestry out here, but we won't. But from Encounter at Farpoint all the way to the very end, right? All good things. Wrapping up Picard's journey with Q, right? Which obviously we see him later. We'll talk about that as well. And yeah, Q's final, Q's kind of final lesson here to Picard, which I feel like the final lesson came more in Tapestry, but I think they were like, well, if Q is in Encounter at Farpoint, we have to kind of find a way to tailor him into this story as well. But at that end of the episode, did we pass the test, didn't we? And he's like, no, Jean-Luc. And as I said, like the trial never ends. What do we think about those Q coming full circle from that Encounter at Farpoint to, and then back in the robes again for that last little bit in All Good Things?
I mean, like his journey throughout the series, there was a learning on his part, right? Because he was put into situations, because of humanity that, he'd never experienced before. And that obviously Deja Q, when he's stripped of his power and that, and he's mortal and he's left to basically defenseless and that. And like his only refuge was like these people he tormented and that, the Enterprise crew. The ending I mean, it's a bookend to the entire show, and the show that almost was, was never meant to be, right? Nobody thought like this thing would make it past season one. But like, yeah, it was nice for him to bookend it with the whole thing with returning to the trial. I mean, he had pushed Jean-Luc so much, like Tapestry, obviously, and that was like, more of the personal journey to him, and that it's like, facing your end, and that would you change anything? Which Picard does. Like going, but like with all good things, it's like he really wanted to see how far they had come and how far Jean-Luc had come at that point. To present him with a problem, and that required him to think like in basically like a fourth dimensional.
Fourth dimensional way, which is just so good. Yeah.
And obviously it's not like the end of the trial. It's more like kind of midterm exams.
Yeah, it's like ta-ta for now, but we'll see you next year.
Yeah.
Or in 40 30 years in Picard season 2, something like that, who knows. Yeah, how about you, MC?
Well, we've got the Doyleist perspective and the Watsonian perspective. From the Doyleist perspective, obviously they brought Q back because they wanted to bookend the series. But from the Watsonian perspective, I mean, Q puts on the whole bluster of the trial, but that is just him fronting, because Q is not responsible for the whole mess of All Good Things.
No. It ends up being Jean-Luc, right? It's like Jean-Luc of the Enterprise actually caused the temporal causality.
I mean,
the negative space wedgie. Well, I think the thing is that they were going to do it anyways. And sorry, Gandalf was crawling all over my desk and just little kitty kaiju.
Kitty kaiju.
But sorry, I got very distracted. The crew was going to do that no matter what. And I think the only way they were going to be able to fix it was in all 3 time periods. So Q might put on the whole air of, oh, I'm putting you on trial again. But really, he's just sending Picard through time because he's the only one who can do the thing. I think it's mostly that Q doesn't want his boyfriend to die.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's still Q's fault to begin with. He's the one who really gets things going with it, telling the Picard that there's a problem, showing him those visions and that, transporting him back and forth through time. I mean, if it was definitely it was an exam. It was all set up by Q. He just he put Picard in those situations where he created the problem that he had to fix. I mean, and I think that was the point of it. He wanted to test him to see if he could figure out why the problem existed in the first place. It's still Q, but Picard still managed to see through it. It's still Q that was doing it, but like I said, this was a test.
It's a test, but I feel like in All Good Things, I kind of lean towards like MC saying here, like you could argue that Q is somewhat responsible for it, but I think Q just does want to be like, I've seen what you've done over the years now. Now can you, like, through the span of time and space, literally time and space, solve this incredibly tough puzzle that your ships are accidentally causing, right? Like, can you do it? Can you unite your crew and be that captain for them in 3 different timelines? I think it is a test on Jean-Luc more than anything, and he does it. He passes it with flying colors. And I do think a part of it's like testing your favorites, right? Like, we know that like he adores Jean-Luc, it's I like to think of it that way. And I do love the bookend of the whole thing. I've always just adored the Q Jean-Luc relationship and the size and the side eyes and everything. And this is kind of just the cherry on top at the end of TNG. So I loved it. Yeah. We have been name dropping Deja Q quite a bit. This is an episode we all decided that we wanted to talk about this week. And MC, you were saying earlier that you think it's Death Wish where Q kind of gets this like change of heart, change of mind. I
think that I said that I thought it was this one when he became human.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Maybe I misheard you. Yeah, this is a very important episode for Q. What happens to a Q when they become human? Like going from a god to a human. And he has to fend for himself because he, at this point still, he has made no friends aboard the Enterprise. Everybody hates him. Guinan literally stabs him with a fork. What did we think about the premise of an episode where Q is a human being? Like pain, hunger, fatigue, all of it. Hawk.
It was fantastic because, like, the fact that he was stripped of his powers did nothing to erase the arrogance, right? He's mortal and he needs help, and yet he's still picking fights, him and Worf, yeah, Worf with his die
Yeah.
comment, and him just like firing right back, and he's like, "Oh, wonderful, Microbrain, eat any good books lately."
Yeah.
Fantastic. Like it started out like you think he would not learn a lesson. He was super annoying. Nobody on the ship was on his side. The only person who was without any vitriol or anger towards him was Data. Data ends up being his savior at that point. It's a really great showcase of John Delancey and the character.
Yeah, 100% agreed. I love this episode so much. MC.
Like we were saying, that this episode is the one that turns them around. And I think they realized they loved John Delancey and Q so much that they couldn't just have him keep on coming back as the villain, because that would have gotten freaking boring and they couldn't have done that. So by bringing him back in this episode as a human, you're able to show some vulnerability with him, which is great. That's how characters become fully fleshed out, by having them be vulnerable. And from here on out, you kind of get the more merry trickster Q. That's why you have everybody in Sherwood Forest, as goofy as that is. They're still not in like super mortal peril.
True.
Like, you don't get the impression that Q would actually let them die.
It's like when we see Q show up at Lower Decks, right? With the chest and shit. He's just doing it for fun. Like, he's not going to hurt anybody at that point. And literally Mariner just tells him to fuck off, Mr. Captain 93. Can we just acknowledge Mariner basically telling Q to piss off in Lower Decks? It's just awesome. Like, they have a rapport as well. And he's like, "Oh no, Mariner, my heart." But that is, I think, a more calm down version of Q from Deja Q. Sorry, MC.
Oh, no, I mean, like, you said exactly what I was going to say. It's like, after this, it's more just shits and gigs with him rather than really trying to hurt people on the Enterprise. Because the first 3 episodes, I mean, the one before this is the one where he introduces everybody to the Borg. So, I mean, I know we're not talking about that one because that's a Borg episode. It's not a Q episode. But it happened. And I think that this was the only way they were going to have any sustainability with Q as a character.
I think it's actually interesting that you brought up the last episode before this being Q Who, because God, what a bad time for the Continuum to turn human after you've done that to the Enterprise too. Like I said, he's made no friends, and he's especially made no friends after that shit. Maybe a little bit of thanks, knowing that there's this big bad out there, but at the expense of crewmates. And no one has any sympathy. It's a great episode too, because Jean-Luc he almost gets to Q back to Q, right? But in this very French, British, passive aggressive way, which is brilliant. Just sitting at his desk, drinking his tea, being like, "You'll get no sympathy from me, Q." It's kind of brilliant how the tables get turned on him, right? Data. I say this every time we talk about Data. If you don't think Data does have emotions, you're lying to yourself. Data literally fucking gives sarcasm to Q in engineering. He's like, "Who does he think he is ordering me around?" Well, he's in charge down here, so him. It's straight up sarcasm,
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Also, one more thing about this episode and the character of Q is you kind of realize he diverges quite a bit from the other Q of the Continuum in that they punished him because he got out of hand.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that. Yeah. Yeah. I do want to talk about, though, there's, even though he's human in this, right? He's still got the humor. This episode's still got a shit ton of humor with Q. And Whoopi getting to get her comeuppance a little bit as well with him. there is that existential dread. It's like, what do I do? I'm a god. What is life? Like, I don't like, it reminded me actually of Quinn, you know, in Death Wish, because like, if I'm not a Q anymore, like, what's the point of being here? So that existential dread there. And then by the end of the episode, Q learns, I think, we're talking about learning something. I think Q learns humility a little bit by the end of this episode. He may not think it like consciously, but subconsciously, I think he's learned humility. What do you think about this, Hawk?
I mean, I think humility came a little bit after the episode, probably in the subsequent episodes in that, because like remember when he got his powers back and he basically transported the Calamarain ship that was trying to kill him into his hand, and he's like, "You think I tormented you before?" And that, just wait,
right?
Like getting his powers back brought back with it all the arrogance that went along with it.
Yeah,
I think he needed time to reflect after, but the one thing, like he, like we always thought Q kind of saw humanity as bugs, evolving, but like, you crush a few, it's like you get over it, right? He remembered like what Data did for him, and he wanted to reward him in that, Data, obviously he wouldn't accept like him being turned into human in that, because like, that'd just defeat the point of his journey, right? Gives him that little gift, right? That big uproarious belly laugh that it lasts just for a few seconds, but like Data would probably be analyzing it and studying it and that for years to come.
I love the little smirk we see from Deanna too when he starts. She's like,
she felt it.
Yeah,
she's
she
like,
did.
She actually felt an emotion. Even Data, he couldn't define it as anything else other than a feeling.
Yeah, a wonderful feeling. Yeah. MC, what do you think about all this?
I'm glad that you brought up that what happened to Q reminded you what happened to Quinn, because this is actually a recurring theme throughout several of the Q episodes, especially once we get into the Voyager ones, because we do have Quinn being turned into a human and things go very interestingly for him. But then we also, the last time we see Q in the 90s era is when his son is turned into a human. And so I feel like almost the Continuum should turn this into like their version of Rumspringa, because and we see with both Q and Q2 that it really, or Junior, I guess is what they call him.
Junior,
that it really turns them into much nicer beings and much more appreciative of their Q powers. So as weird as it is, they need that humbling.
Yeah. I loved everything about just Q feeling, right? And how he doesn't like it, right? It's like, oh God, I have pain in my back. This sucks. Oh, I'm hungry. This sucks. Oh, I got stabbed with a fork. I'm not hungry anymore. Now I'm just sad. Like everything to him about being human sucks. But the fact that through all of that, this crew, this ship, this race of beings that he has been testing are all of a sudden in a situation and he can't snap his fingers or do anything about it. And he's seeing what it's like for them from a human's, set of eyes. And that's a really unique thing that I think does end up changing him for the better. Yeah, he gets his rocks off and he still has fun. But from this point forward, he's, a little bit nicer and a little bit better of a troll, I think he really does learn something here, even if he still does bring them into the palm of his hand.
Sure. I mean, it's that one moment. I mean, like, obviously spending billions of years as an omnipotent being going wherever you want and that, but for that one brief moment in that, he got to look into the void.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He experienced like the gamut of emotions. He got a full like plate of nihilism. That's where he turned to, was basically nihilism. What is the point of this?
Yeah.
By the end,
100%.
So like he could not learn from that.
Yeah. I want to talk about Corbin Burnson playing the other Q, who just for his little brief appearance was absolutely wonderful. But how that Q showing up does expand the mythology because, Hawk, as you were about to talk about, the reason Q becomes human is because they kicked him out. He fucked up and did a little bit. He had too much fun. Like it's amazing that beings like Q do have some form of code, and apparently he did enough where he was banished. What do we think about Corbin Burnson and this kind of expanding the mythology of the Q continuum?
Like he was very good in the role, Corbin Burnson. I mean, I never really kind of followed. I didn't really watch LA Law back in the day.
Yeah.
That was his big show in that, and I don't really remember what he did after that. But that was a great guest appearance on his part because he just got he just managed to get that tone right.
He did.
That tone, like bouncing back and forth between him and John Delancey and that, as the Q's, this Q experiencing humanity for the first time and that, it's like, looking at his hands and that, you just can't believe, like, it's like people exist like that.
Yeah.
He was really good.
Yeah. MC?
I love bringing in Corbin Burnson. I also am not terribly familiar with him. I think I've only seen him in one movie, which is Burt Rigby, You're a Fool, which is one of the funniest movies ever.
Which one? Sorry?
It's called Burt Rigby, You're a Fool. Nobody's ever heard of it. And that's not me being a hipster. Seriously, nobody's heard of it. But up until this point, like he had mentioned the continuum, but I don't think anybody really took that seriously. We just thought he's Q. He is the only Q. And suddenly we see this guy and it's like, oh, there actually is more of him. And you start by being a little freaked out by the idea that there's another one, but then you realize that Q is unique. Like, they're not all like that. They're all very full of themselves and think very little of humanity, but most of them just want to leave them alone. So I think that dynamic is very interesting, and thinking of Q as the problem child just really makes a whole lot of sense.
It really does, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's
and I don't. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, there's been a running theme throughout the episodes he appeared in, and hiding Q when his mission failed, and that the Q basically violently extracted him back to the continuum, and that, and then like with Q, who I remember he showed up because he announced that he and the continuum had parted ways because of his behavior.
Yeah. Yep. Doesn't this also give a little bit more to the Trelane theory too? Because Trelane has a little bit too much fun with Kirk and the gang and gets like taken away, right? It's
by his parents.
Parents. Yeah. I mean, we know that the Q can have children. So like, I don't know. I think that gives even more weight to it.
I believe one of the books actually says that Q is actually Trelane's father.
Oh, damn. That would make a lot of sense, actually. It's an iconic episode. It's so good. We already talked about the Data belly laugh. I just love that he comes straight onto the bridge with a mariachi band. And I've only seen Q like super sad like once or twice, but when Jean-Luc tells him to get rid of it and he just does the cigars and then Jean-Luc goes, everything Q. And he has like a pout that he has to get rid of the mariachis. I'm like, Q, I get it, bro. I want the mariachis too. Let them stay. I love the ending to this. We kind of did a crash course of the best of Q through TNG. Q does
we gotta do the worst of Q.
Yeah, we gotta do the worst of Q. Q makes a quick pit stop on to Deep Space Nine in the episode Q-less, which is season 1, episode 7. He tries to mess with Cisco and gets a much different reaction. Hawk, what'd you think about Q possibly showing up on Deep Space Nine?
Like I can see from a writer's point of view, it's like, okay, we're trying to get this series on the ground, and that, Q's been so popular, he made TNG, and that, we got to bring him into DS9. There was something of a bit of maybe it's a kind of a personality clash, right? I mean, obviously he gets into it with Cisco and that, but like, I don't know if he really gelled into the same scenario in DS9 as he did in TNG. Nonetheless, it was still great to watch. I mean, the whole thing with like, trying to like, you know, zapping away the rest of the crew, setting up like, some sort of like, early 19th century, like, boxing
Yeah.
pit and that,
This was
getting,
yeah, sorry, Hawk, go ahead.
getting popped in the face by Cisco was great, but like, that turnaround and that, he's like, it's like Picard never hit me. He's like, I'm not Picard and that. And he's like, I know, you're much easier to provoke, like even getting knocked on his ass, he still took a big jab, right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. MC?
So I do have more intelligent things to say, but first of all, I do have a theory.
Is it bunnies?
No, it is not bunnies. No,
Damn.
it's that when Q was punched by Cisco, he realized his divine nature as one of the prophets, and that's why he never came back.
Ooh.
Oh.
It makes sense, doesn't it?
It does, because he was able to physically hit him.
Yeah.
Damn, MC. Okay.
Yeah. But
Preach.
I do actually think a lot of it does have to do with the chemistry. I don't think that the chemistry is quite right between them, because we'll find out it's not just that his chemistry with Picard is so good. I mean, it is, but he does, I think, have, I would say, equal chemistry with Janeway. It was just, it didn't quite work with Cisco. And I think part of that might be because Cisco did have this relationship with the prophets. So they had already kind of established this mortal deity thing with him. So Q just kind of felt a little grating. And also, I will present this as an idea. The episode Q-less is to Deep Space Nine what the Naked Now was to TNG.
I disagree.
Well, no, listen, let me explain why I'm saying this. Because Q-less was done specifically because, as Hawk said, Q is popular in TNG. We're on episode 7 of DS9. We haven't established any of the characters. Let's say it's not only Q over, it's also Vash.
I was gonna say this is like a Vash heavy episode. Yeah,
it is a sequel to Cupid, which isn't even one of the best Q episodes on TNG. So you bring these characters over, and with interacting with characters that you don't even know very well yet, and it just kind of doesn't really work because it's just reminding you of things that you like more because you haven't gotten time to get to know this, which is kind of what happened with the Naked Now, because it's like, let's take a classic TOS episode and port it over to TNG before you get to know any of the characters.
But I think that Q, like, I don't know, Q-less doesn't quite work, but I think Naked Now is actually a really good season 1 TNG episode. Yeah. Maybe an unpopular opinion.
To the rest of season 1.
I do like that episode.
I like Naked Now. It's also the fully functional episode. So, I don't know. There's something also.
You're just horny on Maine.
I am always horny on Maine. Never forget it. Yeah, you actually hit all my bullet points already, so I will just cover all of these. Yeah, getting the different reaction. I'm never going to look at this episode the same way again after you said what you said about the prophets, MC. Like, I'm broken now.
I'm so happy.
I'm tripping on that.
Yeah, that works almost too well. And I do wonder, like, what the relationship is between the Q Continuum and the prophets, if there is one. You kind of have to imagine that they're aware of each. Go, do your thing.
In one of the Kelvin comics, they actually do an arc with Q in it. And it is Q, because there's only one Q. So it is the Q from the regular universe as well. But they have Q actually, like, become a prophet in it.
Oh, okay.
And so like Q becomes even more like, this is gonna sound weird, but even more omnipotent.
Is this during the whole
Gee.
like Kalis thing in the ongoing comics, or is this previous?
No,
No.
this was in the Kelvin comics that came out
Oh.
right before Beyond came out.
Okay.
It's really good that like Q sends the Kelvin crew forward to the time of Deep Space Nine, but it's Deep Space Nine in the Kelvin verse.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, yeah, it doesn't quite work. I just also feel like you were never going to replicate that relationship that Jean-Luc had, or not even just Jean-Luc. I know like Patrick Stewart and John Delancey have always been very high on each other, right? And they just kind of hit it off the bat. That doesn't work with everyone. Nevertheless, you still get Q with like, the mustache, the twirled mustache, getting punched in the face. It's still brilliant. But yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, maybe he could have had some fun with Odo, maybe down the line you do a couple episodes with Odo or Quark, dude. Quark and Q, like the QQ they could have named like Q. I think there already is a Q2 episode, or Q
There
squared.
is.
Yeah. So I don't know. You could have done some things, but overall, I think it's good that he didn't stick around on Deep Space
Yeah,
Nine
I mean,
because
I don't want to lay all of the problems on Vash, but I do think the fact that there is a lot of Vash in this episode does not help. The fact that it's mostly Q chasing after her, that's not a good
yeah,
position for Q to be in.
yeah.
Even still, like there was I did notice like a certain callback, to Q Who and that. And it's that anger that Q gets when he is rejected in a
Oh yeah,
relationship,
he does
right?
not like to be rejected.
No, she
No.
said, I don't need you. And he's like, are you sure? Remember that spider bite and that? And he's like, he keeps clicking. He shows her what could have happened if he wasn't there. It was a real callback to like how dangerous the universe is and how he thinks like everybody should be reliant on him to safely passes him through.
Yeah. Yeah. Gene writes the next Q episode needs to be called Cucumber. I like that quite a bit. What's up, Gene?
Cucumber Batch? Are you
Yeah.
suggesting Cumberbatch as
We'll
the
have the
next
Kelvin
Q?
version of
Kelvin
Donna.
tie-in. Oh man. Well, he already played Khan once, so Oh god. So they said, okay, it didn't work with Cisco. It didn't work, on Deep Space Nine, but let's give it a shot with Voyager and Captain Janeway. And dare I say, it was just as good, if not better, with Janeway as it was with TNG. And the first episode, I believe the first Q appearance we are going to talk about is one of, I think, the all-time great episodes of Voyager, Death Wish. This episode ends up having massive ramifications, as we're going to talk about in a few minutes, with the entire Q continuum. It's that philosophical debate about the rights of gods, the rights of omnipotent beings, and then specifically the right for a Q, who, as far as we know, even though Picard season 2 maybe made us question that some more, Q can't die. And we get this episode where one wants to end their life. Hawk, when you first saw this, what did you think about this?
I mean, it was like for me, for Voyager is a weak point in Star Trek, history, and that I didn't really follow along weekly with it. I only like really starting to catch up, but I know I did see this episode just because Q was in it and that, and I was taken aback by how strong an episode it was. And the fact that like for the first time ever took us to the continuum, right? It had like a lot of qualities of Measure of a Man's, not just as a court trial, episode in that, but also because it brought up like a lot of philosophical issues in that. I know in the 90s, like, there was a big movement on the right to die and that. And it's like people actually started talking about that, especially with the case of, what's his face, that doctor and that. Kevorkian, yeah, because he was all over the news at that point, and it's like it really kind of launched a big debate, and that's what's so great about Star Trek is like they'd pick up a newspaper and that, and it's like this is a story, we're gonna do this. To do it with Q and an omnipotent immortal being, and that, why would they want to die in that? And they established a great storyline, a great premise, and a great reason too. It showed you just like how much like not only had the Q, the Q had evolved to a certain point, but like when you reach that point and that, where is there left to go? And are you just happy just sitting there in that, or this? And we encounter one Q who's just not happy, with like being omnipotent in that. It's like, what is there after this?
I love that you just said that, right? About like when you've lived for this long, when you're an eternal being, like what else is there? And I know it's meant to be a funny moment in the episode, but it always, to me, is a sad moment, actually. Like one of his hiding spaces is the Big Bang. I mean, literally, and we know that the Q have been around before the dawn of the universe. So like the fact that that's one of his hiding spaces is that like, it's sad. It's like, yeah, he's literally been everywhere and everywhere. Like what, at what point is it just enough? Like, yeah, it's a like strong moment in the episode. MC.
I think that actually you can almost compare that with, spoilers, the ending of The Good Place.
Oh, good call.
This whole idea of that things need to be finite. Anyways, now I'm gonna actually, I've completed that thought. Now I need to go into, I first saw this episode when I bought the only Star Trek DVD that I bought before I started getting box sets, and that was, I got The Best of Q.
Nice.
And that was the first time I ever saw this episode, and I got to see that, followed by the Q and the Gray, and then Q2. And looking at these 3 episodes, and it's not just because I saw them back to back to back, but just comparing them all together, it is the tightest arc for Q, because you did have so many random Q episodes in TNG that are good, but don't like seriously contribute to the development of Q. Meanwhile, this on Voyager, it's not just because it's 3 episodes, but it's a trilogy. There is a beginning, middle, and end with these Q episodes, and each of them follow into one another. And I think it's really great the way they did that. And I also think that one of the reasons why Voyager is so different than Deep Space Nine, not only is it that Kate Mulgrew has better chemistry with John Delancey.
Dude, it's so good. It's
Avery
so
Brookston.
good.
It's so good. But we almost had 2 full seasons of Voyager before Q appeared, because it's episode 18 of season 2. So that's, Mulgrew had time to really settle in as Janeway before she had to deal with, TNG's leftovers. And yes, we do get another appearance from a TNG character in this, but it's just a brief moment, and it's just because you always got to have Riker in every single series. And this is this actually probably is my favorite Q episode. I love Quinn. I think that he is such a rich character, and I think he's a great mentor for Q. And you can understand where the troublemaker Q comes from. If the troublemaker Q becomes that way after his mentor has been locked away, because he's no longer able to kind of get that learning, and he's bored, and he wants to bust out on his own.
I think
And
I'm sorry, MC.
That's okay. Well, I'm just trying to like actually figure out the timeline with Q's is weird, because you never know how it actually goes, because I think actually Quinn also said that Q inspired him because of his troublemaking, but I think it went both ways, as does Q.
And isn't it weird in this episode how Q has taken on the role of like the rule enforcer rather than the rule breaker?
Thank you, Hawk.
Point?
I was literally just about to say, right? Like, it's funny how Q is kind of the yes man for the Continuum in this episode, which is just completely against the grain, right? Yeah. This episode is, I think, not only one of the best Q episodes, it's just one of the best Voyager episodes. Quinn is great, but it's also just they tried really hard in this episode to like add some comedy, but like if you just like go and watch it and look at it from just Quinn's perspective, it's a really like melancholy episode. You know, it's just sad, like all around. It's sad for John Delancey's Q, right? Because he's being a yes man for a continuum that I think is feeling the way that Quinn is feeling, but they just can't ever admit that to themselves. And it's sad for, you know, a being as omnipotent and, you know, godlike as the Q to just, you know, be at a place where it's like, what else is there? It's just so good. I want to talk about the impact, right, on Quinn's case, because I think it was you, Hawk, who brought it up. Like this is one of those really good courtroom episodes of Star Trek, and Janeway has to be the role of arbiter for godlike beings, and that is no easy task. Like, what did you think about Janeway being that in between Quinn and Q? Also, just before you go, I just want to read this comment. I didn't know this, or maybe I did and I forgot. But apparently Kate Mulgrew and John Delancey have been friends in real life for like many, many years, even before they were together in Voyager. So it makes sense why they'd have really good chemistry on the show.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. But yeah, sorry, Hawk. What did you think about this being the courtroom episode and Janeway having to be the arbiter between the two?
It seemed like it was naturally going to fall to her to have to be the one who makes the decision, right? And the fact that she can be so impartial to it, and that she's asking all the right questions as far as the matter goes, right? It's like, what are these conditions and that you find so intolerable? You know, first, like, you know, going to the asteroid, and it's like, yeah, no, I wouldn't want to be in prison there. But isn't there a way that you could forgive him, bring him back into the continuum, and then like to be drawn into the continuum to see like, you know, what life is like there. I found her performance great. I found her interactions with Q. You know, rewatching it, I was a little pissed off with Q in that, and with the way he first approached her, and that it's like the sexism was just all on the table. It's like, Q, really?
I don't know though. Is it really that shocking coming from Q though?
I guess not. Like, he has no boundaries in that, you know, like, you know, lying next to Picard in the bed and like tapestry and that, and just gently stroking his ear just because he knew how much it would piss him off, you know. But that's the thing, like like Q has to get in everybody's face, you know, and like, you know, with Captain Janeway, it's no different. It felt like low blows, but yeah, like, you know, if Q is like really kind of like parsing, you know, the personality of someone in an adversarial or friendship, you know, this is the direction he'd go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
MC?
This is really one of my favorite courtroom episodes, as you said. This is one of the best because it's not just it's Janeway having to make this huge decision, and Tuvok has a really great part that I don't think that we get to see a lot from Tuvok. That's actually like using his Vulcan law to actually deal with the law in this, which is interesting because you think that Vulcan law would have more impact on the Federation. Vulcan is very isolationist, considering they're a part of the founding of the Federation. It's very strange. And having Q as, you know, the prosecutor in this, it's just so it's funny considering how we were first introduced to Q as the judge up on high.
There it is. Yes.
And it's also just it's a lot of fun, the people that we have brought into this episode. Isaac Newton and a random hippie from Woodstock and freaking Riker.
Yeah. I just like the whole courtroom aspect of it. I also love that, like, the evidence, right, that we find out that Quinn has played, like, it's that constant, like, the continuum, whether they want to admit it or not, has almost an unhealthy obsession with humanity and Earth, because here's this other Q who's inserted himself into like 3 major life events of these 3 people on Earth who are very like important to Earth history. I always thought that was really an interesting part of the trial as well. But Yeah, kind of what you said, like MC, just like asking all the right questions, right? It's it's a really tough case, and she ultimately makes, I think, what's the right decision, but also the hardest, right? Um, because she does give him the chance, and he does become human. It's like, you could be a part of this crew, you could really help us. And instead of taking that experience of trying something new, it's still not enough at that point for him, and he still ends up taking his life, and that at the end is, his right. So it's a tough decision. It's a great episode. FC, you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say, of course, there's also the implication, which I'll say is really just saying it outright, that Q is the one that gave Quinn
Oh, he
the
did.
poison to actually kill
Yeah,
himself.
he
Yes,
did.
he did.
He did.
Which is really this whole episode. Q goes through this very quick journey of being the yes man for the Continuum to going to be not just the rebel that we saw before, but an entirely new version of the rebel, and that's me teeing you up for the next episode.
Like rebellion.
You couldn't have given me a better transition, MC, because Janeway's decision and Quinn's ultimate suicide leads to Q, as MC just said, having a full change of heart, and leads the voice of this like revolutionary sect of the Continuum that wants individual rights for Qs and rights to choose and things like this. And it's a very big deal. And that leads us to the Q and the Gray, which is just, speaking of sexism, by the way, absolutely fantastic. It is the full blown Q Civil War directly because of the events of Death Wish, and Q flirting for a good reason, we turn out later, but still gross, with Janeway. What did we think about the ramifications of Death Wish coming full circle? Not that, it's like episode 11 of season 3. So this happens pretty soon after the events of Death Wish. Hawk, what did you think about this?
I mean, like, the episode is so misleading to begin with in that, because, like, we get the whole thing of Q trying to seduce Janeway, saying, like, this is perfect. We were made. We could make a child together. It would be so unique in that. The satin sheets, all that stuff and that. And it's like, and then asking the crew how he can, asking Harry and Tom and that about, like, what's the best way to approach her? It really underscores, like, what's happening in the Continuum, and like how bad things are there, like a full-blown rebellion, between those who want to maintain like the status quo and that, and like all the people that Quinn's death, like, and Q's advocacy over it, inspired to take up arms against their fellow Q members. It's insane. Like, it's almost a little diminished by the fact that, like, when humans actually see it, all they can see is like the Civil War replication in that, because, like, what's happening is just, it's insane. It's gods versus gods, or omnipotent beings versus omnipotent beings. And there's this whole everything, like the universe is basically collapsing in on itself because of it. Like, they continue on, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse, supernova after supernova. Like, it's a crazy episode.
It really is. It really is. MC, what do you think about this one?
Out of all of the Voyager Q episodes, this one is my least favorite, mostly because of the Q chasing after Janeway. There's a lot of grossness in the way that it's done. I don't love it. I do love Susie Plaxton as Lady Q. She's fantastic and everything, and I like the way they mate. I do have to wonder about Q's thought processes on mating with Janeway, about how that kind of touch of humanity will change the Q Continuum. What happened to Amanda Rogers?
Yeah, right? Yes. Yes.
I mean, I know I believe she was full Q, but certainly she was raised as a human. So.
Yeah, but, plot holes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they kind of forgot about that.
Maybe they
episode right
couldn't.
away.
Maybe they couldn't get the actor back. Like, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, she was available. That was
Yeah,
what
but
was that? Oh, what was her name?
Olivia d'Abo
That's it.
from the Wonder Years.
Yes, absolutely. I think I don't know. Like I would thought about that too, but she was apparently like a full Q. Like the fact that her parents kind of left the continuum, became mortals, had a child, started a life together in that, and then like the tornado came and smashed the house. I don't know. I feel like they're trying to reset this with this premise, in the fact that like the Qs with their revolution, wanting to do something different, wanting to get beyond like what they were about. It was a confused idea, the Q mating with like a human to create something entirely new would have solved all the problems. I'm still not sure how two Qs having a child together solved all the problems too, but
Well, I'm trying to think about it, and I'm wondering if it's just that the Q, as we saw in Death Wish, are bored. They're not doing anything, and
maybe they're not
Quinn
fucking.
kind of shook.
they're not doing a hell of a lot. They're sometimes they're the scarecrow, sometimes they play the pinball game, and that's about
But
it.
Quinn shook him up.
Yeah.
Like his death did not have any ethereal impact on things, which is what Q was worried about. That having a Q kill himself would rock the continuum just because you're taking a Q out of it. And just to bring up true Q again, from that one that a Q dying isn't actually going to impact them because they've executed Q before. But it's the mental, social aspect of it that having Q become human and then die, all of the other Q kind of realized it's like, oh, we don't just want to stand on this dusty road reading these books or playing pinball or being the scarecrow. We want to do something. And so then they start warring with one another because I think there's, the different sides. Some of them still want that dusty road, some of them don't, but it's still something different for them to do. And then once the Q child comes in, then it takes a village, or it must take a continuum. And certainly as it comes out in Q2, taking care of that kid would take the entire continuum.
Yeah, true. It was a way to make I think at that point they had stopped interacting with each other as a species, and that, like, even to the point where they weren't talking and that. But yeah, after the event, after Quinn's death and everything, they started talking. They started interacting.
Well, and I think that Death Wish and going into the Q and the Gray also just is a reflection, like Hawk, you were saying earlier, of the times, right? Of the right to be able to take your own life or not. Like, no matter what, in the 90s, now, before then, it doesn't matter. Suicide is always, with no matter what, a touchy subject. There are cultures who believe in it. There are cultures that are vehemently against it. God forbid you mention that to the GOP, like, Jesus Christ. I'm a strong believer that you should, like, if you're at a point where you don't want to be alive anymore, like, you should be able to take your own life. But that is an extreme view for some. It might be an extreme view for some people in the chat. Like, I don't know. Taking one's own life is a very big deal. And when you're speaking about a godlike race of beings, it's got to mean something even more to them, right? For something this big to happen. Like, because if you think about it, right, you were just saying they're not talking to each other anymore. One's the scarecrow, one's playing the pinball game. They're that bored, but they won't ever think about taking their lives. So
it also raised that point in Death Wish, and that how can a society that believes in capital punishment not believe in the right to take your own life?
That's the United States.
The Republicans.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't even think it's a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's a human issue. There are, I'm sure there are plenty of Democrats who don't believe in suicide. I think, on both sides.
Yeah.
Again, it is a very touchy subject. And again, talking about a godlike species, you get a civil war over it. And it's really interesting. I want to read a comment that Jesse just wrote, which I think is really good. So speaking about Janeway and Q and the flirting and the grossness of it, I think it's supposed to be gross. Q is always so wrong about humanity and oversimplifies human interactions. Like, right? I mean, obviously, is this a product of the 90s? Yes.
Sure.
But does that make sense to, yeah, like Q doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. That's why he is like in the holodeck, like asking Harry and Tom for their advice. And why I think it's ultimately Neelix who like gets her to almost go on his side with the fucking puppy, right? Like he almost wins with a puppy. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing. It's
totally, it's not out of pocket for Q as far as behavior goes, right?
Yeah. And then again,
I still don't like it though.
No, you don't have to.
Yeah.
She followed up with, "I'm Q, I'm amazing. Of course she'll want to have my baby." That's how he thinks. I'm sure that's how all of the Continuum think. Is it still gross? Yeah, absolutely. Want to talk about something that we were just talking about, how it's kind of the introduction of Q's son, right? They end up having this baby that I think reignites something in the Continuum, and you see it at the end of the episode, right? How much it's changing. Freaking Kathryn Janeway is the godmother to a Q. It's kind of a great scene at the end. Anybody?
I did like that scene, you know, especially the Q and the baby and that, and like just like how into it. He seems different, right? A different kind of Q, interacting with the baby. Loved it.
I think it's almost the talking about Q's needing to have something. This is Q actually having something new. He doesn't have to be bored anymore, because you could probably speak to this more, Julian. I'm a bitter spinster with no children, but as I understand it, that you can see the world through your children's eyes.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a completely different, you're just never the same after you have kids, right? Like it's these weird ass things sometimes that make you crack up or make you smile for like no damn reason. It's absolutely insane. And I'm sure that's exactly how Q is feeling when he's bouncing him, little Q Jr. on his lap. So no, that's exactly MC. Yeah. Any other thoughts on the Q and the Gray? Good.
Good.
All right, let's talk about something that we all wish maybe went a little bit better, but there's some great moments with it nonetheless. And that is the return of Q in Picard season 2. The surprise of John Delancey reprising that role after decades. Hawk, we were already doing this show, well, and I think for a couple of years at this point. We watched the previews together. We were excited as hell together. When we first saw that teaser with the Queen card and you hear the trial never ends, the voiceover, like, man, how did you feel knowing we were getting Q again?
Oh my God. It was like, season 1, obviously so rough. My thoughts are on record about this. I was so excited for season 2. Bringing Q back in, it just made so much sense. And like it started off strong, dude. Like, I think second episode where like, John Delancey and him really get to interact, for the
and
full
Q
episode.
slaps the shit out of him.
Slaps the shit out of him, starts walking him around his mansion and that, and it's like showing off all the atrocities that he had done. And we still don't know what it means. It's like, is it another trial? Did something happen? Does Picard have to fix something? We don't know. There was so much promise to it, right? I loved it. And like, even after like 30 years, like the interactions between John Delancey and Patrick Stewart were just amazing. And like, especially Delancey, he just slips into it so naturally. I mean, I wish he had become a bigger star, after like TNG, but I feel Q kind of followed him around a little too much.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
In his career, but at the same time, it's just something he slips on like a coat, and it's just like, I just want more.
It's actually unfortunate. Besides Q, the only other role that I really remember John Delancey for, I think it's the movie called The Dentist, and he plays like a creep, or maybe it's not the dentist. Maybe it is the dentist. He plays like
Are you thinking of The Hand That Rocks the Cradle?
The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. Sorry, not the dentist. Yeah. And he plays a creep in that movie. And that's Yeah.
One of his best post TNG roles was second season of Breaking Bad when he played Jane's dad.
I still need to watch Breaking
Oh,
Bad at some
right.
point.
Yeah.
MC, what did you think about when you saw? Were you watching Star Trek by season 2 of Picard? Yeah. Okay. So what were your thoughts about Q coming back?
My thoughts were like Hawk said, like when that preview came out with the Queen card and the voiceover, it was, oh my God, I'm so excited. And I'd already watched the first season of Picard and was not at all thrilled with it. And having Q come back, a character that I loved, suddenly made me feel excited about it because, oh my God, I love Patrick Stewart and John Delancey's chemistry together. So if we're going to have a show called Picard and we're able to see the chemistry between them again, it's going to be great. And the first appearance of Q is so good. Like, I mean, the CGI is a little dodgy, but it was only there for a second. But that moment where he appears as he did from back in the day, and he's like, oh, I got to catch up, and he snaps his fingers, and he's John Delancey now. It needed to happen like that because I think everybody was saying it's like, oh, he better do that. And they actually
That's exactly what they did.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
The way he delivered that line, because I also feel like John Delancey is one of those lucky actors who, as he's gotten older, his voice really hasn't changed that much. So like the minute that you first hear it, oh my God, it's John Delancey, it's fucking Q, that's his voice. And he goes, look how old you've become. Let me catch up. And it's so good. Like, MC, holy shit. I got goosebumps just talking about it. But what I like John Delancey was also in Gargoyles.
Everybody was in
Gargoyles from Star Trek. But Hawk, we've talked about this, I think, over and over and over, how about those first few episodes of Picard season 2 were good, and then just
like a second showrunner took over at that point.
Yeah, I really wish that we got to see more of this paranoid Q who is dying and did not account for something and is trying to help Jean-Luc but doesn't have the time and has to he has to assault him. Something listen, he's killed people on the Enterprise. He's fucked with people's lives on the Enterprise, but he's never done it out of fear. And when that is such a striking, no pun intended, moment in season 2 when Jean-Luc's, I've had enough of your bullshit, Q, and it's just like, oh shit, like something's wrong. And Jean-Luc says that, he's like, something's wrong. What's happened, Q? And it's not just the acting with his voice and this level of paranoia. It's John Delancey's a great physical actor. He's a great face actor. And I don't know how they did it with makeup and everything, but the way they made him look just wrong. The bloodshot eyes, the tired, baggy eyes, everything. It was so visually striking, and we were just so excited to get him back. And those first few episodes were just wonderful. And instead of going into the negative of where that all went, because we don't need to do that, because this is for the very best of Q, let's go right to the very end of season 2. That moment where, we know Q is dying at this point and he's going to use his final act, and they have the embrace, right? And they hug. But that final moment where they're sitting in Jean-Luc's
broken arboretum.
Yeah, the broken arboretum. And he goes, even gods have their favorite, Jean-Luc, and you've always been one of mine. And I think Jean-Luc maybe said something like, why? Why? He's like, because I care about you. It's this, we talked about maybe like Encounter of Farpoint and All Good Things coming full circle. But really, this is really the full circle moment where he does express this almost love, this deep affection that he's had for Jean-Luc over these decades that he's been a frenemy to him. Hawk, what did you think about these last moments between the two?
like, as frustrated as I was, I'm glad I'm able to go back to this moment and look at it with, more fondly in that, this wasn't about like, writing the universe or correcting something. It wasn't about testing him in that to see if he was worthy in that. It was like Q at that point was kind of like, Patrick Stewart himself right now in that. I mean, like you know, he's at that point where it's like, he has seen more sunrises than he is going to see.
Yeah.
And the fact that Q did all of this to help him get over some stuff that Picard had never gotten around to dealing with himself, and that, like, all the stuff that happened in his childhood, everything regarding his mother, the hatred he had for his father, and the fact that, like, at the end of it, there's that moment he replaces the key in the thing for the little boy to be able to find, so that the whole cycle can play itself out. And he's like, "That's what I was waiting for." It's like, you still made the right choice. Not, as much as it hurts, you're still going to go through it. And that it's just like, you and I are both coming to our ends. It's like, you need to get over it. I'm doing this not for, to write the universe, whatever. And I did this for you. You need to get over this and know that you're capable of being loved and loving, because he's like, I love you. I'm a god. I'm on my way out. I'm dying, but I have always loved you. You have always been my friend, no matter how desperate things got between us. Yeah. He's like, I always considered you a friend. It was a perfect bookend for them as a on-screen interacting, frenemy thing.
Yeah,
I loved it.
Same. MC.
It's lovely. It was these two people who have been through many situations over the past decades, most of them Q's fault, but they have this bond between them. And I think that this send-off is very comparable to the end of Tapestry. It kind of, it really, I feel, bookends that, because we know that the reason why Q saved Picard in Tapestry is because he didn't want to see Picard die. And in this, he wants Picard to be there at the end, because he's the only person who's kind of had emotions for him, even if a lot of the times they're negative.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
It's never like with him and Picard, it's never been outright hatred. Picard never hated Q in that. And in fact, like, in some aspects, he was kind of fascinated by him. Obviously, even with their banter and that, there was a mutual respect that went on between them, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right to call out Tapestry in that. I mean, I don't think Q saved him in Tapestry. I think he knew that he was going to live through it in that, but he just took that moment when he's unconscious on the table and that to, really get in there. It's like, if you were going to die in that, did you have any regrets? And that's like, and showed him where regrets and that actually lead to.
Yeah. I love this. And I'm just gonna, because Hockey already answered and I'll answer it too. Like, is this a fitting send off for the character? Yeah, like, I think this is the perfect send off for him. And yeah, we get the teaser at the end of Legacy. Take it for what you will, whatever. I liked it, but I didn't need it. Like, I already said goodbye in season 2. Yeah, it's just kind of like the perfect bookend for the it's like Frodo going off in Return of the King on the final boat, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's that moment for them, and I really, really liked it. Finally, let's just talk about the legacy of Q, right? And the man, John de Lancie. Like, 4 series that Q has been on. What has his impact been in the Star Trek universe? Should we have had more? Is it enough? Yeah, MC, go right ahead.
No, it was 5 series.
5?
Because he was in TNG, DS9, Voyager, Picard, and Lower Decks.
That's true.
Oh, I did the Lower Decks erasure. Gene's gonna kill me again. Sorry, Gene.
Sorry, Gene.
Gene's like, you motherfucker. Yeah, sorry. Oh, go ahead. Or anybody on that, really.
I mean, the legacy. It's really hard to put into words for that, right? It's rare when that, like I said, it's rare. It's a gift and a curse in that, when you find that role that you kind of really fit into, as John Delancey has with Q, enough so that he is such a fan favorite. He got 5 series, 5 franchises of 5 versions of Star Trek he appeared on. And if there's one thing I can criticize about New Trek, it's that they really need a character like that. Somebody that they can come back to. They seem to have stayed away from having like an omnipotent trickster show up in this. Maybe because they think it's been played out and that, but no.
I think they were trying, Hawk. I think they were trying really hard to do it with Harry Mudd. But I think for the type of series that
would have
sorry, Gene gave me shit for the erasure, and then I automatically went to my Tendy, and Dave probably Julian fondling poor Tendy because I oh god, sorry. I think they tried, Hawk. I did. I think because he had the first episode where they're in prison. They did a whole Harry Mudd short trek, and then right, it was, and then I mean, Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad was incredible, and 3-4 years. I mean, 3 seasons, and then 4 is being worked on now. It's not out of the realm of possibility that he shows up in Strange New Worlds.
He should.
So
I mean, again, it helps to really alleviate some of the stagnation when you can get a character like that who kind of pops in and that creates havoc in a comical way. It opens up a show, right, to new ways of telling a story to the audience. And Q, as mischievous comic, devil, whatever he was, and that he always brought fun to the show.
Yeah, agreed. MC.
Bringing up the idea of other recurring characters like Q in other series, I do have to wonder, Giraffe did mention in the comments before about Riz Darby in Strange New Worlds, if Riz Darby is going to be playing Q or AQ. And I do have to wonder, and this might be going into your next point a little bit, can we get another Q character? Or is John Delancey just so iconically identified with Q that almost like the whole Q continuum is kind of untouchable without him?
I would have to agree with that, which actually leads kind of into my next point here, because John Delancey's performance, I feel like you don't have Q without John Delancey. I mean, obviously we never saw anybody else play the role, the main Q, but it's hard to imagine anyone else with that mantle. So I think that's a really good point. Yeah, does everybody want to talk about how Delancey elevated that role? Because I mean, I could talk about him forever.
It's a combination of it's the voice, it's the face. It's like the face is so animated. It's like he can keep it still and as he did when he's playing the judge and that, and keep it kind of dreadful looking on that, and then he can get manic in that when he's blowing on a mariachi horn. I don't know. It's just a weird combination of things. Some actors have it, some don't. It's like you could probably, it's like anybody else they put into this role in that, probably, I don't think would have brought the same kind of that indefinable quality that makes an actor so suited for a role. And that, it's like, can you imagine anybody else playing Tony Soprano other than James Gandolfini?
Yeah, his son. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Which they kind of tried to do with Q.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. All right.
MC.
Yeah,
I know you kind of already said it. I'm sorry.
It's just wonderful. And I particularly, there's just something about his delivery that even when he's saying something stupid, he can do it so imperiously that it brings the omnipotence to it. Like you can understand. It's like, yeah, this guy is all powerful, or at least he thinks he is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Before we wrap up, any favorite Q moments that we did not bring up? Chat, hosts, anything that we may have forgotten? Yeah, go ahead, Hawk.
Of all the way he kind of like would aggravate and pick at Picard, my favorite still has to be in Tapestry, and then showing up as the the Candygram guy in that, and he's like, "Is there a Jean-Luc Picard here?"
So
going
good.
out of his way to mispronounce his name so badly.
Yeah, that's a great moment. MC?
So I have two of them. One of them is we have already talked about the celebration moment at the end of Deja Q, but my favorite part of that is when he gives the women to Riker and then he turns them down, and just the way he says, "You were never like this before the beard," and then he gives the ladies to Worf is just so wonderful.
And Worf is all about it. Did you notice that too?
Is it Worf or Michael Dorn?
Okay, good point.
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
And then my other favorite moment is actually the last one that he had on Voyager, when he decides to show the universe to his son, and is also kind of made to do it because he's been shackled to this kid for the rest of eternity, according to the Continuum. But also just the really nice thing that he sends Voyager just a little bit closer to home, but he doesn't send them all the way, because what kind of lesson would that be for his son to do everything for them? It was just very sweet.
I love that moment that you just brought up about, I always think about that moment when he does send them home a little bit more, but what kind of lesson? We've been talking about it, we were talking about it in Timeless when we did our review during our favorite episode series of how like Voyager has a purpose. I feel like the universe just somehow knows that Voyager has a purpose, and Q knows that Voyager has a purpose in the Delta Quadrant. Obviously, the Department of Temporal Affairs knows that Voyager has a purpose. The Borg know that they have a purpose. So I do like that moment a lot, because it's like, you still have work left here to do.
Well, actually, the thing is, I believe Q2 is in the 7th season, isn't it?
I think so. I'd have to go and look again.
Q is sending
It's
them
at least season
to where
6.
the Borg warp
the conduit.
The conduit is,
Yeah.
He is actually taking them home, but first they got to get rid of the Borg.
Yeah.
Which is actually making amends for what he did, introducing humanity to the Borg.
Look at you, MC. Bringing everything full circle tonight. I love it. I'm here for it.
Season 7, episode 18. Also, we failed to mention that Keegan Delancey played the.
That's right. His own son played him. Yep. I just want to say that I think my favorite Q scene is still from All Good Things, when he takes Jean-Luc to like ancient Earth, to the primordial ooze, and he's ooze, and it's like, oh, but the way he's like, something's wrong, like the things that make life aren't making life, and the way he's like, he's so close to being that Q all the way back in Encounter at Farpoint in season 1 again. He's like, TikTok Jean-Luc. It's so good.
Yeah,
it's such a
like
good
the
scene.
Proteins and the amino acids.
Yes, the proteins. Yes.
Yeah. And nothing happens.
Yep. I love it. I think that's such a great scene between the two. That's it, man. That's the very best of Q. And I'm sure we could do a whole nother episode on Q, because there's a shit ton of Q content out there. Any final thoughts before we go into the mailbag on what makes Q one of the greatest Trek characters? I think we kind of covered it, but if anybody wants to go,
I think we covered it.
Then let's get into the mailbag. Who wants to start?
I could start.
Oh, MC, after you.
Okay. Fef wrote, well, Fef didn't write as much as she gifts, and it's a good one. Her favorite moment is Jean-Luc waking up next to Q in Tapestry.
Like I said, that little stroke of the ear.
The little stroke of the ear, but then also when Jean-Luc notices who it is, he pulls up the blanket and he's just like, oh. It's so British modesty. I love it. Take Matt Harker's, please, Hawk.
Yeah, Matt Harker wrote favorite moment when Cisco hit Q, as well as the famous scene where Guinan has her showdown with Q in Q Who. Oh, I know. I mean, that's a whole other topic to explore. Is like Guinan and Q, and like the Q actually went to war with the Elorians.
Yeah, there should be like a Q miniseries, like a Q Elorian miniseries. That'd be really cool. Dana wrote, Q is the original Chaos Goblin. I look up to the man more than Tuvix. I aspire for my friendship with Julian to be like his and Picard's. Trust me, it is. And you're the Q, and I have to keep telling you to behave. MC, can you take Champion D's, please?
Champion D wrote, favorite Q moment, definitely his scene with Picard in the solarium at the end of Picard season 2. The way he helped Picard reconcile with his past was some good material. Really great acting on John Delancey's part as well.
Indeed. And could you take Eric's, please, Hawk?
Our co-host Eric wrote, favorite Q quote to Worf. Oh, very clever, Worf. Eat any good books lately?
Such a good line. Oh man, Giraffe left us for the finale of Severance later. Yeah, I'm not on the Severance train. Everybody else is, not me.
I haven't gotten on season 2 yet, but I will.
Yeah. I will take Dave Primes for my favorite Q episode. It is a tough one, but I have to go with Q Who. He showed Picard and the crew some tough love, but in doing so, helped them and the Federation start to prepare for the Borg incursion. Favorite moment? That has to be the bit on Deja Q when Guinan stabbed him in the hand with a fork. Yes, 100%. MC, can you take NY Lights, please?
NY Rawlite wrote, hard hugging Q as they said goodbye still gets to me. Q practiced the hard love Picard and Starfleet needed. He got them out of their smug complacency to face the Borg and all the other terrors that awaited them.
Hey, there we go. And Hawk, can you take us home, please, with JMC Treks?
Sure. JMC Trek wrote, there are so many great Q modes to choose from. It's hard to pick just one. What I will say about Q is, I've seen the character labeled, in my opinion, unfairly as a villain. I think he's anything but. Has he caused his fair share of mischief and chaos? Yes, he has. He caused first contact with the Borg. That entire situation is a temporal mess for another discussion. And has put the crews of the Enterprise and Voyager more than once. I think he meant to say put them in danger more than once. But he's also saved them as well. And shown that he has a soft spot for humanity, proving he's a complicated and multifaceted character.
As this whole episode has, I think, more than proven as well. So great points. Tara in the chat, you obtuse piece of flotsam. Yes, better late than never, Tara. That is going to do it for this one. Obviously, a big happy birthday and thank you to John Delancey for bringing Q to our screens for almost 40 years now, something like that. It's insane.
Nearly 40 years.
Nearly 40 years. Getting old. Just an absolute legend. Next week, we are back with our finale of the favorite episode series. Eric is going to be back on the show, and he is going to make us all cry because we are going to be talking about Deep Space Nine's The Visitor. That is going to be great. Also, just everybody real quick, start prepping for Star Trek Discovery Season 5. It is going to be our final Discovery episode ever because we are saying goodbye, doing a deep dive and look back at the final season. Our watch-alongs start, I believe, this Monday. And like I said, we're going to have like a spinny wheel of stickers because I have so many Discovery stickers. That's it. Like, sub, all that fun stuff. Hit the bell if you're not subscribed to make sure you get alerts on when we go live. Post the awesome shorts that MC has been creating and all of the other fun stuff we do. So I will say, mwah, go with Q, live long and prosper, Mazdram, sarcastic Vulcan salute, and good night.
Thanks for beaming into our podcast today. If you want to keep the hailing frequencies open, you can subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Like what you hear? Put in a good word with Starfleet and leave us a 5-star review.